Hey guys,
I'm Jerry.
I'm Sierra.
We're ladies.
And we tangent.
Here, we want to each hold it. You gotta hold one arm.
Oh,
we're gonna do both pieces separately. What's
up,
everyone? Hello.
Look at our merch.
Whoa.
Isn't it neat?
I have this in a tank top version for Shane, and he put it on, and he immediately turned into 2011 Warped Tour.
Yeah,
Daddy Shane, and was just doing mosh pit stuff.
Sure.
Love it. I also have the pink long sleeve.
Ooh.
I don't know where it is. I've already worn it, and Forrest wore it, and that was really cute. And then I'm obsessed with this.
That's amazing.
I also have this. This is the hoodie with the Ladies in Tangents heart on it.
Yes.
And it's great.
That tie-dye is phenomenal.
And it's already covered in dog hair,
it
so
is,
apologies.
But that's okay. That's all right.
Apologies for you.
All right, dogs.
Speaking of apologies to everyone because the dogs are fighting over a bone.
Absolutely. Butt shit.
I know, my God. Oh my goodness. Mosby keeps throwing that ass back into
I'm like, okay, my MacBook is on.
Good Lord.
Put this up here. All right. Yeah, what I was gonna say too is if you do order merch, I know there's been some questioning about.
Oh yeah, this is the Palentine's merch. If we didn't mention that,
it is the Palentine's merch, and yes, it will ship after the show. So it's gonna take a while, but that's only because we.
It's essentially like a pre-order.
Yeah. So it's basically like when you used to have like Girl Scout stuff and you would order it, but they can't like put the orders into the system until they get all the orders, which is going to happen after the show because you can order merch up until the show and even after. So
yeah,
what fun. So there's that.
What fun is right.
Yes.
Also, we are not going to be doing a whole lot of chit chat in this episode because Sierra has a lot of notes.
I do.
This is an important topic and we want to make sure that we get through it. But should we tell them what I did to you?
Yeah, I think probably. Okay. Yeah. You can go ahead.
So we're going to tell you one short story and then we're going to get into it. Okay. So my dad is the cemetery director.
Aha.
Okay.
Okay.
And I went to visit him today after Ollie's preschool screening. And I'm sitting there, we're talking, and I look under his desk and I see this box, which I am immediately horrified of because it says cremation remains on it. And
cremated remains, yeah.
Cremated remains on it.
Over it.
All over the box. And it's like a U.S. Postal Service box. Yeah. And then it has cremated remains. And I'm like, I didn't know that was there. Is there someone in that box right now? And he's like, no, we buried him yesterday. And I was like, okay.
Great.
Okay, cool. Can I have that box? And he's like, you want this box? And I'm like, I want that box. I took the box with this plan that I was going to tell Sierra that we got something in the P.O. box that needed our immediate attention.
Uh-huh.
And so she came over and I presented her with this box.
Yeah.
And I gave her scissors and I was like, this is horrifying. What is in this box?
Oh, do you want me to tell?
Yeah,
or are we going to wait until they see it?
I mean, that's up to you. We can tell you what it was, but I did record it. I do think it's probably poor taste to put it like on TikTok or something. I don't know. You guys let me know. Maybe we'll tell you the story and you tell me if it's okay or not to post the video.
It was a funny prank. It might not have been.
Yeah, it's a funny prank between us. I didn't intend to. I just wanted to have it just in case. But we will share the video on Patreon. I just don't. I feel like letting the masses see that prank would be too much.
We get yelled at for a lot of things.
Yeah, you tell me if you think it's too far.
So I opened it up and there was a letter that said, hi, Jerry and Sierra, I love you so much. I recently became a member of the Dead Grandmas Club, and me and my Mimi used to sit and watch you guys all the time. We loved you. God, I wish you had the note still. Well, you'll be able to see it because I read it aloud in the video.
Yes.
But basically saying, and I recently became part of the Dead Grandmas Club.
And as soon as I heard you guys talking about cremation on the last episode.
Yeah, I knew that I had to send some of my Mimi for you guys. Or something to that effect. She's my bitch in a box. And then signed it.
Sierra's reading this note aloud like basically laughing the entire
By
time,
the way,
like in disbelief.
Because I'm shocked and also a little excited. I'm not supposed to tell you guys that because Jerry said, disclaimer, please don't send us any of your dead relatives. But
Yes.
also at the same time, I think you expected me to be horrified.
I did. I expected her to be horrified because I would have been horrified.
And instead, I was so giddy.
Because she's like, this has to be a joke. And then
I thought it was like a prank.
She looked in the box and there was a blue velvet bag.
Yep.
And she picks it up and she goes, here's Mimi.
And I want to say I wasn't excited because of a dead person. I was excited because I was like, how special that someone is choosing to send, like, trusting us with their relative who is recently deceased. And I was so ready to, like, let's go find a spot for Mimi. Like, she needs to be some. I was going to take her to my sunset spot.
Yeah,
like,
mad respect for Mimi.
Yeah. I was going to treat her right. Instead, I did pull out the ashes because I needed to see. I was like, no
hoping
way.
because, and this is where I asked Shane if maybe I took it too far because we do have Louise's ashes, who was my dog, and so I just got her blue velvet bag with her ashes in it because I also knew it needed weight.
Yeah.
Because it didn't have weight in it, and I don't know how much a person weighs, and so I didn't know how much.
I didn't think we were gonna get all of Mimi. Honestly, I was like, this is so much.
Probably a tiny beagle's worth of Mimi.
Yes.
Beaglesworth sounds like a rich evil person. Anyway, she did in fact.
I pulled it out and then immediately saw the hair because they give you a tiny bit of your dog's hair. It's very sad. The ashes, and I was like, wow. She also said this was some of Mimi's hair. That is dedication. Also, Mimi was like not that old because that is jet black hair unless she was dyeing it in her 80s. My God. Yeah. But also then I noticed the sticker said Louise Steinmetz. And I was like, wait, you can see me processing in my mind being like, and the last fucking thing I thought was that you were pranking me. I was like, oh my God, her grandma had the same name as your dog? That must be why they feel so connected to us. That makes
the mental gymnastics you
And then
through.
I was like, wait a minute, is someone stalking us and they murdered your dog? And this is their way of being like, surprise.
I knew that you weren't going to initially think it was me because I don't pull pranks. I don't like pranks. I think they're stupid, but this box really this box really got my wheels turning, and I'm like, God damn,
Not to mention this prank she's been plotting this all day because I will say earlier we had a fun little, we were working from home today because I didn't feel too hot, and then you had cabinets coming.
Yep.
So but around noon, I decided to take a little break ski and go get myself coffee and get Corey something to eat and myself something to eat. And so I went through Starbucks, and there's somebody that's there who listens to the podcast who used to work at the other coffee shop where we used to go to work sometimes.
Right.
And so as soon as she saw me, she was like, Sierra, hi. And then I was like, oh my God, hi, how are you? And then she literally looked down at her thing because you must ordering, and she goes, oh my God. She like turns her headphone away and she goes, it's Jerry, this is Jerry. And I was like, you're joking.
And I then she starts calling me while I'm ordering, and I was like, I'm gonna have to call her back in a second. And then I did that, and she goes, are you enjoying your Starbucks?
So creepy.
Which, like, you called me when you knew I was ordering, so I couldn't answer. And then you asked me if I was enjoying it, knowing I hadn't even made it to the window.
I just wanted to scare you. I wanted you to be like, because you were like, what? How do you? Where are you?
Now I'm justified in pranking you.
You are.
My prank was better than your prank.
It was.
I had the cremation box next to me.
Did you?
When you called, yeah.
Well, that's why. So then
I had just picked it up.
So this is why. So she goes, oh my God, I have to tell you, because I said, what are you doing at Starbucks, you silly goose? We were there at the same time. We must have both had like a work break. And she's like, well, I actually stopped at the P.O. box, and I'm a little scared because of what we got in there. And I was like, what? And she's like, you'll have to see. And I was like, what could it be? I thought someone put like for the ass munchers or something on the box.
No.
And I was like, hey man, some of my mom's friends work at the post office. Like, you gotta be cool when you're sending us shit.
No, Sierra's first, when she saw the box, she was like, I gotta show this to Corey.
I took a picture immediately. I was like, this is what it was. There's something wrong with me that I got so excited.
I know. I'm now more concerned for my safety after that prank.
I was just like, this is such well, first of all, I was like, this is a fucking amazing story that I can't wait to tell for the rest of our lives. That somebody was so, like, loved us so much that they trusted us with their dead grandma.
Do not send us your
Please
relatives.
don't. Hey, disclaimer. Please don't.
As much as Sierra would love it,
No,
please don't.
Please don't. Don't. Because Jerry won't like that. And don't find my address and fucking send them to me. Because I will.
That's horrifying.
I was going to say I will call the cops on you immediately.
Can you imagine calling the cops and being like, hey, someone sent me their dead relative
in the mail and I don't know.
In the mail?
Yeah. And they don't know my address, so that's scary too.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't do that. But also, if you would have, I would have taken great care of her. Is all I'm saying.
Well,
I was like,
we can take Louis to the sunset spot. No, I gotta ask Shane. We gotta keep. I don't know what he
just
wants
a
to
little bit of her. I'm kidding. That's not my spot anymore. Well, if you wanted to, I would take care of her. I'm just saying, I will take care of all of your relatives, dead or alive.
Louis' favorite spot was in the window, and I don't think we can put her there.
You just put her in the window still and like put something over it so that you can't pick her back up.
One time I found her in the window. Well, I like got home from the store and I heard crying and I opened the door and she was standing in the window. I have a video of it.
A stop? Like a stop? I'm confused. Was it open? Was it closed? What's happening?
Was my front window, my very large window.
Yes.
She had gotten on the couch and then walked onto the window and then walked so far out that she couldn't turn back around. So she was just stuck.
How did you get up there? It's okay. It's okay. You're
okay.
That felt really bad. That was sad. But anyway.
That sounds like Louie.
Big rip Louie.
Was she here still when we started this?
Yes, she was. If you listen to the beginning episodes, Louie is in some of those.
Big rip. Louise.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well.
And we're transitioning.
We are going to transition
into something serious.
Yeah, very serious. And that's why we wanted to not do a lot of, we're going to have more of a chit chatty because we had a good week together, I feel. So we want to talk about that. We're going to do that on our Patreon. So patreon.com/ladiesandtangents. I apologize for anybody who's like, what? I want to hear the chit chat. But I want to dedicate as much time as I can to this because I think it's a very serious topic and it deserves it. And I spent a freaking long time researching about it. So
I'm excited.
I'm going to do what I hope is justice for it.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm probably just going to get mad.
Knowing that knowing that I'm, one, not a journalist, and two, I have ADHD like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
So I apologize to you because there might be quite a few times where I pause and you might have to pull those out. But I just want to make sure, because last time we did this, I got names mixed up, and I just want to go at a good pace and make sure I don't fudge anything up.
Yes. Pauses are totally easy.
Okay.
No worries.
Also, so we are doing a Tangents and True Crime, sort of, but we've kind of decided, I don't know if we talked about this here on Patreon.
Briefly, I think we've mentioned it.
So we're kind of setting like how we want the months to go.
Like a schedule.
A little bit of a structured schedule in a way.
I think we'd all benefit from that.
Yeah, agreed. And we all like a bit of a routine mixed with a bit of chaos. And I think that's what this podcast is all about. So we're going to definitely do, like, next week is Valentine's Day that it'll be coming out. So we are doing host stories.
Yes.
Another one. So please, if you have some and you want me to look over them, we now have an email. So LNT, so land T stories @gmail.com. You can email me your host stories, and as long as you put like host stories in the subject line, I will know to read those ones. And that's what we're doing next week. Then we're gonna have like days like today where we're doing a Tangents and True Crime, but we're doing less of a true crime. And I mean, this is going to be a true crime because it involves murder, but I want to do less of like giving like a serial killer and do things that maybe you've never heard about that also have a bigger impact on something like historically that we've never heard about. So that's what we're doing today.
Cool.
And then a couple other little things throughout the month, like, maybe having a dog psychic.
Oh my gosh. I wonder if Louie's going to come through and be like,
hey, stop touching my ashes.
Yeah, I'm not a
God, that
joke.
was a bad week to do that. Or a bad month, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't predict when you're going to find a cremated remains box.
And then you got to like fucking pounce on it when you do.
That's true.
Not physically. Sorry.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of months, that's the reason why we chose to do this one this month is because it is February. So now it's, sorry, Louise. Not Louise.
Not Louise. This is Birdie.
I never thought she was Louise until you just made me handle those ashes.
I didn't make you handle them. You voluntarily handled them.
Oh my God. She's in my mind now. Okay, I'm sorry. So the reason why we wanted to do this now was because it's February, so it's Black History Month, and we're going to be discussing Sundown Towns and also the murder of Carol Jenkins. Got to do with each other. So let me rattle off my sources real quick, like I'm a professional podcaster, and this is a professional podcast. Okay. Wikipedia. No, seriously, but it was good. But I also have an article on blackpast.org by Ross Cohen called Sundown Towns, a 2002 article from the New Yorker. This is a big one. And actually, this article kind of helped this case get solved. So, from the New Yorker by Mark Singer called Who Killed Carol Jenkins? What a 33-year-old murder has done to a town. A book by sociologist Dr. James W. Lowen called Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of American Racism. And if you want to learn more about Sundown Towns, please read that book. I got it. I mean, I've just been skimming it, but I am going to read it in its entirety because it's very informative. An episode of the podcast, My Favorite Murder, because that's where I first heard of this and was like, whoa, that's something that I didn't know about in regards to Sundown Towns, and that it seems like a big part of American history. Why weren't we taught about these things as white people? It's maybe not something we should be ignorant about.
Right.
Turns out it's because they're probably still around.
Yes.
So, and episode 1, season 1 of the Injustice Files titled Sundown Towns. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what Sundown Towns are.
Okay.
Sundown Towns, this is straight from Wikipedia, also known as Sunset Towns, Gray Towns, or Sundowner Towns, are all white municipalities or neighborhoods in the United States that practice a form of racial segregation by excluding non-whites via some combination of discriminatory local laws, intimidation, or violence. The earliest legal restrictions on the nighttime activities and movements of African Americans and other ethnic minorities date all the way back to the colonial era. Shocker.
Right.
I put this part in, and I'll tell you why in a bit. There's a reason. So the General Court and Legislative Assembly of New Hampshire passed an act to prevent disorders in the night in 1714. That said, whereas great disorders, insolencies, and burglaries are oftentimes raised and committed in the nighttime by Indian, Negro, and mulatto servants, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, and slaves to the disquiet and hurt of Her Majesty's subject. This is, again, while we were still. No Indian, Negro, or mulatto is to be from home after 9 o'clock.
And so they had curfews.
Yes. And I wanted to put that part in specifically because, and I know it's like 1714, and this is such like a extreme example that you can see. But when people make laws like these, and we're still seeing this today, any kind of laws like this, they think they're doing a good thing.
Right.
And it's easy to pass because they're telling the world, we're protecting you.
Yeah, their constituents believe that they're in danger and that this law is being put in place to protect them.
Yeah.
But like from who?
Right.
From what?
But that's the whole thing.
Yes.
And again, you're still
fear-mongering.
seeing this. Yeah. That's why, like, terms when people are saying thugs and things like that when it comes to police and discrimination and injustices that we're seeing today are like, who do you think they're talking about when they say things like that? And because when they say it, you know who you're picturing.
Right.
And it's because they describe those things when they're talking about Black men mostly, but Black men and women who have been killed unjustly by police officers.
Right.
That's just a small example.
We've talked about that before, I think in cognitive dissonance, or maybe it was one of our first video ones. It was a really long name. It was something that you were learning in college.
Yeah.
Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, but I can't remember.
It was the one where we talked about like your first thought isn't your fault, but your second one is.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about like when people say these words, which they do intentionally.
Yes.
They intentionally use this terminology to kind of elicit an emotion from you.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're going to picture who they mean without having to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you said, like, you know who you're picturing, that is where you have to like check your bias.
Yes.
And like, why am I thinking that?
Yes.
Why am I
That's what I'm
feeling
saying.
that?
I'm not saying that I want this to come from a place where I'm not accusing you or saying that you're a bad person if that's the first thing that pops into your head. That's not what I'm saying, because there's a reason why, and they're doing that for that reason. Like, and that's not your fault. But if you don't check that and you don't fix that, then that is your fault. And that's why we want to bring this to...
That they would continue to get away with it.
Yes. That's why we want to bring that to your attention. And this intimidation could occur in a number of ways, but mostly including harassment by law enforcement officers themselves, which is not a surprise, as back then a number of people, and this is not like bias or judgment, there's recorded like evidence that lawmakers, government officials, law enforcement officers were part of the KKK in a lot of the United States at a certain time. So,
and you have to think too that if that is their mentality going into these positions of power, why wouldn't they make these laws to then be able to act on their prejudice under the guise of
I'm protecting
law and order?
Yeah, this is for your protection, and I'm doing a good thing for you.
And they could also just be intentionally harming someone who didn't do anything wrong, but they can spin it because they have the power.
Well, that's what we're seeing with quote unquote illegal aliens, and the way that they're spinning immigration and innocent people who are locked away in cages, children.
Yeah.
And the way that they spin that into it being like, but I'm doing this for you, and so it's okay.
I don't need you to do that for me. Nope.
I don't want you to. Thank you. New laws were enacted in the 20th century. City planners and real estate companies used their power and authorities to ensure that white communities remained white and Black communities remained Black. That was on purpose.
Yes.
These were private individuals making decisions to personally benefit themselves, their company's profits, or their city's alleged safety. So their methods in creating sundown towns were often ignored by the courts, of course, because it was all a bigger plan, In addition to unfair housing rules, citizens turned to violence and harassment and making sure Black people would not remain in their cities after sundown. And this is not just specifically Black Americans, Black and brown, Jewish Americans. Like, this happened to anybody that basically wasn't straight white.
Yes.
Well, I don't even know about straight at that time. As long as you were passing and you were white, you were good to go. But anybody else, it was like fair game in these areas to basically be harassed and worse.
Well, and I'm sure same-sex couples as well.
Oh, if you were caught, I'm sure.
Yes. It's just minorities.
In general. Yeah. Since the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, and especially since the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and their prohibition of racial discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of housing, the number of sundown towns has decreased. However, in that book, The Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of American Racism, Dr. James W. Lowen says that it is impossible to precisely count the number of sundown towns at any given time. However, he believes there was at one point over 15,000.
Holy shit.
With over 2 to 10,000 suburbs that were
within them.
That were also sundown towns at a certain time.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Right. But because most towns have not kept records because why the fuck would they?
Right.
Yeah, they're embarrassed and rightfully so. It is hard to say who's what.
Well, and that's what gets hard too, is like someone wouldn't have to necessarily label their town a sundown town for the law enforcement officers to still have bigotry and racism.
Right. Oh, 100%. Especially if, and again, we've talked a lot and we've said.
Or citizens.
Yeah. We've said, actually, you just mentioned this the other day when it was just you and I, how you're proud of us that when we talk about like ignorance, we say it in a way like you and I are ignorant, and we don't say it in a way that's necessarily like a shameful or bad thing, because I think it's easy to be ignorant if you grow up somewhere that is predominantly all white,
right?
Not very like not a lot of minorities, but at the same time, check those when you're realizing
when
that
you're a kid
maybe
and when you're a kid and you're growing up, you don't necessarily think about it. You're just like, oh, they just don't live here.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't live here.
Right.
But like now when you get older and you get exposure to more things and we have access to so much information, you kind of have to actively choose not to know.
Exactly.
And learn.
Especially nowadays.
Yes.
That's why we're doing this, because I think it's important. And again, I don't want anyone to feel like I'm like calling out a specific group of people, but
no, I think it's
important to learn your history so we don't fucking repeat it, because it is so easy to repeat these things, and it is still ongoing, even though so many people will tell you it's not.
I'm going to use an analogy that I don't know. I'm going to be building the plane as I fly it here. We'll see if it lands. But when you're talking about things like this, I think people imagine you're in a room. Okay, and it's dark, and someone is explaining to you something, some kind of an object.
Yeah.
And you think you know what it is. You're like, for sure, I know exactly what that is. It sounds so familiar. I think it's this.
Yeah.
And then someone turns the light on, and it's not that.
Yeah.
And they're like, but it had to be that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel angry that it's not that, and I feel stupid that it's not that.
Yes.
Do you want someone to turn back off the light so you can still pretend that it's that even after you've seen it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the point that we're making is allow yourself to have the light turned on.
Yeah.
And give yourself grace that you didn't realize you were in the dark.
Yes.
You know?
Oh my God.
Did it land?
That was good.
Did the plane land?
God damn, that was good. So, Black Americans were not the only minority group not allowed to live in white towns. Oh my goodness.
So sorry.
So for some examples, the towns of Minden, Nevada and Gardnerville, Nevada had an ordinance from 1917 to 1974.
Holy shit.
That required Native Americans to leave the towns by 6:30 p.m. each day.
I just don't understand. I just don't understand how you can look at a group of people and be like, you're no longer allowed here.
Well, especially like the group of people that like, that's their area.
Yeah.
You fucking stole this
I mean,
from
the
them.
whole place is theirs.
So like, what fucking audacity to be like, not you. I don't know. That's why I wanted to leave that little part in the beginning, not to justify in any way, but just to be like, there are little things that people do to make it seem like they're doing the right thing. And it's when you strip those away that you realize how barbaric some of these acts really fucking are.
Yeah.
So then, listen to this shit. A whistle, which later became a siren, was sounded at 6 p.m. daily, alerting Native Americans to leave by sundown. In 2021, this is last year, the state of Nevada passed a law prohibiting the appropriation of Native American imagery by the mascots of schools and the sounding of the sirens that were once associated with sundown ordinances. So, like, for fucking sports shit, they used to use... Can you imagine...
I'm like sick over that.
I know. That's why I'm so sorry but
No, that's okay.
I'm a little desensitized because I've been listening to this shit for about a week, but that was how it hit me first. Because when people are like, just leave them alone. It's a sports team. Why do we have to change? Can you fucking imagine that? Being at a sports game or playing in one or having your children playing one and hearing the fucking sound like it's a celebration of something that used to tell you to get out of a town or you could be murdered.
Right. Justly.
Yeah. Unreal.
We talk about how we talked about in the residential schools episode how there are people who are still very much affected by because there are still schools in certain places that are stripping people of their culture, of their identity, and causing generational trauma. There are people who are experiencing the effects of the generational trauma of those who went to those schools before them. Were forced.
Yes.
And so now they are still being re-traumatized, and it's mocked.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, first I'm just going to minimize your existence and force you out of a place that you are totally within your right to be.
Yeah.
That was yours in the first place. And then I'm going to take the thing that traumatized you, instilled fear in you and separated us as human beings. And now I'm going to use it to announce that I've just scored a touchdown.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to? Let's add gaslighting to the mix then, because
to minimize it.
Despite this law, Minden has continued to play its siren, claiming it as being a nightly tribute to first responders. Get a fucking a different tribute.
Yeah.
Pick a different thing.
Why? Tribute to what?
I don't know.
What were they first responding to?
Right.
With that siren.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Very upsetting. Get a different thing. Play a whoop, like a do.
You go out and clap.
Yeah.
Remember everyone was doing that during COVID? Go and clap
that was
for
really
them.
Nice. Those videos always used to make me cry.
Yeah, very emotional.
Yeah.
That's horrific.
Horrific. It's upsetting in a way that it's so naive of me to even say, like, I can't imagine. I'm like upset that I can even say that, because what a privilege of me to not even be able to imagine feeling that generational trauma on the level and having people minimize it as like,
constantly.
Would you relax? It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
Horrifying. In Nevada, the ban was expanded then to include Japanese Americans. 2 examples of road signs documented during the first half of the 20th century include in Colorado, there was literal signs up on highways that said no Mexicans after night. And in Connecticut, whites only within city limits after dark.
What in the actual fuck? And you guys wonder, and by you guys, that's obviously a generalization.
So, yeah,
but
ambiguous.
like people wonder why just this year during freaking the Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
And that horrible mass shooting that happened. Like, you wonder why people still have these huge amounts of prejudice and this racism and this hatred that makes them do these horrendous acts. It's because it used to be they used to be protected under the law.
And normal.
Right.
And
and in some cases, some kid can go across state lines with his mom underage with a gun that wasn't his and still do it and be protected under the law.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like you said, maybe that kid wasn't alive during this shit, but his parents were. His grandparents were.
Right.
Where the fuck do you think when they make these things illegal that those people just go, oh boy, I was wrong?
No.
No. That's why you
Where
have
do you
to
think the whole snowflake thing comes from?
Yeah.
Oh, people are too sensitive these days.
Sensitive? What do you mean?
Because we don't want people to be kicked out of a place that they should be allowed to live freely and safely?
Or murdered, harassed, threatened.
Okay.
Yeah. Racial exclusion in Sundown Towns was also achieved with violence. Any Black or brown Americans who lingered in Sundown Towns, even during the daytime, experienced harassments, threats, arrests, and beatings. It was not uncommon for Black motorists passing through these communities to be followed by police or local residents to the city limits. In extreme cases, hostility towards Black Americans resulted in extrajudicial killing. horrific.
Mm-hmm. I feel like when you put it in that context, you can think of any of the names
Yeah.
that have
Yeah.
come
There was
across.
there are some, like, it just keeps happening.
Yes.
And every time it does,
Like
people
Ahmaud
are just,
Arbery. He
Yeah.
was followed by 2
Yes.
people. Yes, they were then convicted, but like how long did that take?
and what had to happen for them to finally be convicted.
Right. They were just 2 citizens following this guy around and murdered him.
Yeah.
Tamir Rice.
Yeah.
Like it boggles my fucking mind that
Yeah.
people can just roll up and be like, sorry.
I'm going to take the law into my own hands.
Yes. Or the law shows up.
Trayvon Martin.
Mm-hmm. The law shows up and Breonna Taylor sleeping,
Yeah.
chilling, and they're like, well, could have been.
Yeah.
You could have been the person who I needed to arrest, even though you weren't, and now you're dead.
And then it's just excused as like, well, they could have been a threat, or they were a threat. It's like, what's their word against yours, and they're dead now.
Right.
So how the fuck is that fair?
And if you look at the track record, who has been elevated and who has been painted to be a terrible person or just inherently bad?
But yeah, years and years and years and years. We're seeing that in just this small amount that I'm sharing with you now. That unfortunately, it's easy for you, and I'm talking to you, it's just like
ambiguous you.
Yeah. To be ignorant to that if you are somebody who is a white person who didn't hear about these. I mean, it took me until I was in my 30s to know that these existed in a place where I live.
Right.
And so it's easy to kind of be like, well, why would these people lie to me, I guess? Or why would they? It's so hard to believe that like this evil exists in the world and has existed in the place where you live.
Right.
And that it's kind of been the norm. So you want to challenge that. You want to say, no, it's not. No, you're wrong. But it's not. And there are millions and millions and millions and millions of people who have been telling us that it's not. So I think it's time that we listen.
Well, exactly. And I think we want to believe that the people who we think love us and want the best for us are being honest with us. But if we believe their truth, then we're calling all of the people
else a liar.
Yeah, everyone who has actual lived experiences, we're calling them liars, or we're minimizing it, we're gaslighting them. So like I will never, and this is why we would get in fights with people.
Yeah.
When they would come to us and be like, police officers, blah blah blah. I get it. I understand. However, I'm never going to look at someone who has always been in a position of power and who has always been respected and portrayed in a positive light in the media. Because even if a cop is portrayed negatively in a television show, like a scripted one, it's always like, that's the dirty cop. And there's always so many more that like get him, and turn him in and make it clean again. And like, that's not accurate. That doesn't happen.
How often, especially back in the time period that I'm going to talk about, is like, how often did they, before we had cameras and things like that constantly being, how often were things like this caught?
Right.
Or was it just your word versus mine?
Right.
And then how many times you can talk to anybody who's had these experiences and they will tell you over and over again how this is not new, how it is not something that has just happened in the last 2 years. So it's not just about the one in the city that they found like on a TV show. It's like, how many were keeping quiet for that guy?
Right.
And then you're also not a good person if you do that.
Right.
And not all, I know, please, we're not all, I know, this is not the place for that because it's not, please try to understand the deeper message that we are portraying here before you just get triggered by the small amount that we're saying.
Because even saying not all, to me, you're minimizing.
Yeah, what has happened?
Every person's experience with the bad.
Yes.
And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to say, well, not all are bad. Who's saying that though for the POCs?
Yeah.
Who is saying that on behalf of the people who are being murdered? You know what I mean? So like, I don't want to hear not all cops are bad. I don't know that.
Yeah.
So, and we've made this comparison before is to not all men. I don't know that.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to take it.
Right. If you're going to sit me in a room with 100 men, I'm afraid of all of them because I don't know the good versus the bad.
Mm-hmm. And you can't tell by looking at them.
No.
Same thing with not even just law enforcement, but people of power.
Anybody in power. That's what we're trying.
Yes.
It's anybody in power because it's the lawmakers. It's the government officials. They are just as much to blame.
Yes.
Okay. The rise of sundown towns then made it difficult and dangerous, obviously, for minorities to travel long distances by car. Think about this. You just want to take your family on a nice vacation. And you have to fucking worry about where the fuck you're able to stop for the night, where your children and your family will be safe.
Or where your destination is going to be.
Yeah.
Where you're going to stop for gas.
Yes.
Can you stop to eat?
Yes. In 1930, for instance, 44 of the 89 counties along the Route 66, which goes from Chicago to Los Angeles, featured motels or restaurants that were prohibited and that prohibited Black and brown individuals from entering after dark. 44 out of 89. That's almost half.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? So in response to this, Victor H. Green, a postal worker from Harlem, compiled a book, and he called it the Negro Motorist Green Book, which was a guide to accommodations that served Black travelers. And the guide was published from 1936 to 1966, basically highlighting
where you could go.
Where you could and couldn't go.
It is amazing that resource existed. Horrific that it had to.
And even like sadder that this now is the first time we are hearing about this. When if you talk to anybody of color, I'm sure their parents, their grandparents will tell you they knew because at the time, at the height of its popularity, it was used by over 2 million people.
Oh my God.
And that's just something that has never even been on our fucking radar.
Never.
We wouldn't have even known about.
And it was not published anymore in the 60s?
It stopped, 1966.
66.
Yeah.
Okay.
But our parents were alive.
They were alive. So could you imagine, even today, regardless of whether they are labeled sundown towns,
right?
Are any of them really safe?
Right.
Have they really made that much of a change?
Yeah.
Or even
Still,
if they
most
did,
of them
let's say they absolutely did. They made a 180 and they are just the most welcoming place ever. Are you going to risk it?
Yeah, right.
No.
And again, this is why if you're a person of color, I'm sure they'll tell you, or their parents or something, like they know this shit. They've known this shit. This is not new to them because I'm sure growing up, they heard things like that. We can't stop here. We can't, you know, like it's fucking upsetting that that's even had to be something that was on anybody's radar at any point in time, let alone as a small child.
Right.
Okay, historians have found that most sundown towns deliberately hid the means by which they became and remained all white, obviously, because not something to be fucking proud of.
No.
Apart from oral histories, there are often few records that describe precisely how sundown towns excluded Black and brown Americans. Laws and policies that enforced racial exclusion have largely disappeared. Shocking. But de facto sundown towns existed well into the 1980s, and there is evidence that there still may be some today. Upsetting.
Yes.
And
I think that there would probably be several people listening who would say, I wouldn't be shocked if my town was a sundown town.
Well, I'll tell you, if you would like to find out, there is a website that you could go to. I'll tell you it right now because I looked up ours. And ours was not, just so you're aware.
Oh, that's
But
good.
there is one very close to us that was.
Oh, I'm
well,
sure.
It's probable. So it lists like possible, probable, definitely was. Like there's things like that. Okay, so the website is justice.tougaloo. So that was a college, I guess. So Tougaloo is spelled TOUGALOO.edu. So if you go to that, and I think you can put /sundown. I just typed that in and it like took me to the into Google, and it was like
Yeah.
a drop down box. But I went to Ohio and looked it up. So here's all the ones in
Oh
Ohio
my
that
God.
were. You see how far I'm scrolling still.
Yeah.
So that concludes that portion.
I wanted to mention this.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to, because I'm trying to be so respectful, but things like this get me into such a like
a heated.
Yeah, like that I have to make a joke or I'm just going to sound like I'm fucking yelling and being upset, because when I learn about these things, it is so upsetting. And it's even worse that I like didn't know. And I feel silly and stupid for being ignorant, almost like I'm a part of the problem, which I guess in a way I am for that. Even though I know being ignorant isn't my fault, it's like, okay, I'm 30 now. That's not an excuse anymore. So it's just upsetting when I hear that. Like, I'm shaking talking about it, even though I've been deeply looking into it for over a week now, and still it's like hitting
I can hear
hard.
I can hear it in your voice too, because I also saw you like messing with the couch, and those are two tells for me that like, this is important, but you don't feel 100% comfortable, because there is like what do we even know about this? We're white, we're privileged, we are like, what could we even say? But at the same time, like, the fact that we are talking about it is a start.
Yeah.
And that's all. Like, you're never going to get anywhere if you don't just move.
Yeah.
So
definitely. And because it's so emotionally charged, and rightfully so, there's going to be potentially, I hope we get a good response, but there are potentially going to be people who told me either things were wrong about it, which is fine. If you do, I totally understand, and like I welcome that. But then you'll also get I'm defensive, what you said was wrong, and it doesn't apply to me or my town or whatever. And it's like, I just don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're going to aim it at someone, I'd rather you aim it at us than at people who don't deserve it and have been dealing with it generationally forever. So like, fucking bring it on, I guess.
I don't think it's, and I think that's our approach to most things, is like, it's not fair for us to be like, I don't want to deal with the backlash of speaking out for someone who is being hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Over like fucking our entire course of history.
Right.
So if you're going to have a backlash for anyone, bring it on, I guess.
I did want to, sorry, I just touched your toe.
Oh,
I did want to mention two Black creators who are also like online educators.
Oh yeah, please.
One is Monique Melton. Her Instagram handle is MOE Motivate. And she has a podcast. It's called Shine Brighter Together. She also has courses. So she has like multiple courses that you can take online. Basically, how to become an anti-racist, like how to become a better ally. And like, some of the things that she posts are very triggering to me, because I feel called out. But that's important. It's important because she does not shy away from challenging my whiteness, essentially, and how I show up to support people of color, of any kind. But mostly she speaks like from her experience as a Black woman, and it's powerful and it's important. Chiquita Patterson is the other one that I wanted to mention. So she has a racial awareness guide. The handle is United Street Tours. So they also have a class, how you can be a white ally. Basically, there's a quick guide where you can figure out how to be a better ally and giving you some next steps. There's like online courses where she's speaking like directly to you, almost like a live stream, and giving you educational resources. So those are two that I wanted to mention that have been really inspirational and informative. And to know that these women put themselves out there and do so much work to offer information to people, like, they don't have to do that. No one owes you that, but they are putting the work in, despite being the people who are most obviously affected by it. So anyway, just wanted to mention those for you.
Thank you. All right. Now we're going to talk about the murder of Carol Jenkins, unfortunately. Okay. So a little backstory. Carol Jenkins was one of 6 children born to Elizabeth Gooden. And in 1949, when Carol was still a toddler, her mother remarried a man named Paul Davis, who took Carol in and treated her like she was his own. Paul says, in reference to Carol's biological father, she went to see him when she was 15 or 16, but she called me daddy. So she was very much a daddy's girl, very much like that was her dad growing up. And even though she knew of and had met her biological father, like
she had a relationship with this guy.
Yeah. The family lived in Rushville, Indiana. And so a little bit of like a setup here. Carol was 20, I believe she was about to turn 21 years old. And her dream growing up as an adolescent was moving to Chicago and becoming like a model, a career in modeling. But unfortunately, you got to have some means to do that. So at the time she was working in a factory in like an assembly line position, but the factory just went on strike. So she had to supplement that income a little bit. So to do that, she got a job selling encyclopedias door to door. And for everyone who doesn't know, everyone Gen Z, encyclopedias was like the internet before the internet was around.
Yes.
It was on paper, and there were like so many fucking books that you had to buy.
Did you have someone come to your house to try and sell them?
We've had encyclopedias.
Yes, we had like kid versions.
Yeah.
So I was like obsessed with them.
Me too.
I was like, you have to get all of them.
Yeah.
I need every letter.
They were so, and I don't think we had all of them because
we didn't we didn't have them all either.
But we did have a few, and they were like so interesting. I
know,
loved reading encyclopedias.
I was really
kind of lame to say now.
I was torn between wanting like the weird letters and also wanting the ones that probably had the most stuff in it.
Yeah, right.
Like,
you got to get the A's and the S's and the T's and whatnot. So, because you could, when you were a door-to-door salesman, you were working off, or, commission. So, like, she figured, okay, I can make some money. She was a good-looking young woman. Right. She was a Black woman living in Indiana. And if you didn't know a lot about Indiana in the 60s, wasn't great. Yeah. There was a lot of KKK.
Racism?
Yeah. Well, there was definitely, that was like a big area for like the Ku Klux Klan. And it's funny when we talk about sundown towns because you would think like, oh, big in the South. But it was more so in the North because the South was so heavily populated with Black Americans and obviously like Mexicans. Other races were down South a lot. That like the North towns were the northern states were where all of the predominantly white areas were who had these kind of like.
And I think people when you would think sundown towns would naturally think the South or places that are typically more shown as bigoted, racist places.
Yeah, but no, guess what? It's all of America. Yeah. Surprise! None of us are exempt just because we're like. The North didn't have slavery, or we moved away from it. Right. That's still, nope, racism exists fucking everywhere. Yep. So, unfortunately. Okay, so the day of September 16th, 1968, Carol had to attend training for to like do this, but then she was going to set out with a couple of coworkers, 3 coworkers actually, another 19-year-old Black woman and 2 white men, and they were going to start selling. So they were going to Vincennes, Indiana. Okay. I looked up the French way to say that, but this is America, so they probably butchered it. But that's where their destination was supposed to be, okay? During the training, though, they were told that the best time to sell these encyclopedias was in the early evening, like when people were getting home from work, getting ready for dinner. So at the time that they were driving, they were about 90 miles short, but they decided anyways, because it was like almost 4:30, that they needed to stop where they were. And that happened to be in Martinsville, Indiana. So at the time, Martinsville, Indiana didn't have the best reputation in regards to racism. And it was suspected, at least, to be a sundown town. From the New Yorker article that I read by Mark Singer, this is a quote. I recall more than a decade ago while reporting a story in Indiana, hearing Martinsville mention tangentially. I'm tangentially. Whatever. I can't say words.
But it made me feel like special
for
some reason.
And being told that it had an all-white population and that Black people made a point of not stopping there. That was my first encounter with the legend of Martinsville. The notion that it's a racist town where no African American, much less a solitary and attractive African American woman, would want to be caught after dark. In the years since, Martinsville's civic burden has, in many respects, worsened. Discussing Martinsville with reporters from other Indiana cities, I've found that the conversation never gets very far before references of the Ku Klux Klan creep in. Also, the year before this, in 1967, there was a KKK meetup, rally in Martinsville. And they said that one of the leaders said that the reason they chose to meet up there was because of the town's history of
welcoming of
their KKK population, I guess. I don't know.
Ugh.
So then an Indianapolis Star columnist named Ruth Holliday also wrote a couple stories about Carol Jenkins and described Martinsville as having been, quote, a Ku Klux Klan stronghold. I'm just going to say KKK because that shit's going to fuck me up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I can't.
No, you're fine.
I'm already heated and my voice is so, all right. Also, Carol's half-brother Larry had visited Martinsville before to play football, and he recalled it being a very racist town where the students and adults alike threw out various racial slurs at the young football players. And in fact, while me personally looking into Martinsville, I found numerous complaints about this all the way up to 1998. And if you're wondering what kind of things they were saying, just think of the fucking worst shit you can. And then, that was said to high schoolers.
And I'm sure that, just because it's not been necessarily reported since then, I highly doubt.
Oh, I think it was Sports Illustrated, I believe, did a fucking whole article about it because they were, suspended then from being allowed in tournaments and shit after being heard for a year. I think that's it. For a fucking year.
I think people watch Remember the Titans and they're like, oh, it wasn't
it's
so bad.
Yeah.
Look, everyone was doing that dance. It ain't no mountain high enough.
No.
What?
Nope. Sorry. Unfortunately, no.
It's called whitewashing.
Yeah, and they didn't show you all the parts where they were getting spit on and called the N-word repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So whether or not Carol knew about this at the time is unknown. Whether she knew about the history of the town. It's possible that she thought that she would be safe traveling with other people, especially since she was with two white men. Or maybe she didn't feel comfortable telling them that she did know about it because, again, how the fuck would they... That's number one, it's your first day on the job. Mm-hmm. You can't be like, actually, we can't stop here and you guys don't understand why, but let me try to explain to you why.
Right.
So they ended up stopping there and they decided that they were going to split up, go door to door, try to cover more ground, and then they would meet back up around a local gas station at about 10 o'clock at night.
So were they all going out solo or were they splitting up 2 and 2?
I think they all went solo.
Okay.
Either way, if they did go 2 and 2, the women ended up being split up.
Right.
So, however, at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, when they all were supposed to meet up, 3 of them showed up and realized that Carol Jenkins was nowhere to be found.
I can't imagine, and this is in the 60s.
Yes. 68.
That.
By the way, this is 5 months after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Just to give you a fucking
time frame.
Yeah.
I can't imagine 2 men in the 60s at the height of the civil rights movement and also the height of misogyny.
Right.
Letting 2 women go door to door selling by themselves.
But I don't think they gave a shit.
No. But if they were Black, they would know, you can't come with me because they're not going to want to buy from me.
Right.
But I think if it was a white woman, I think they would have. You know what I mean?
100%. I totally get, Okay, so as she was going door to door, Carol noticed that she was being followed by a black car. And so she's walking to these houses. She's going door to door. She's looking over. She sees it following her in her peripheral. She starts walking a little bit faster. Then it comes up behind her and they start shouting things at her. And she becomes frightened enough to knock on the door, on the next door. And luckily for her, the people who opened the door were a newlywed couple. They were a white couple, Dawn and Norma Neal, and they had just moved in there. And she apologetically explained that she was frightened and they told her to come in and that she could wait in there while they tried to phone police and get some help. She explained to them that the men in the car had followed and yelled at her, but she couldn't make out exactly what they were saying. But obviously it was not nice things.
Right.
It was enough to frighten her
Right.
into potentially going into a house where she didn't know if there was more danger.
Right.
So Dawn Neal ended up going outside then, but at this point the sun had set. I think it was after 6:30. And so Dawn went outside to see if he could see the car, but he couldn't see the black car that she had described. However, across the street there was an unfamiliar light-colored sedan parked near his house that was just kind of idling there. So the car's parking lights are on, but he couldn't see inside the car. So he kind of goes around and like gets enough so that he can see the license plate. And he tried to memorize the numbers, but it was kind of difficult to see with the lights on and whatnot.
And every time I think about that kind of situation, like if I would need to memorize a license plate for whatever reason, I in my mind I'm like, I could do it. No fucking way.
No, I would forget almost. I can't remember. I
don't know
learned
my own.
Corey's phone number this year.
I made a point to memorize Shane's when we first started dating because I had my ex-boyfriend's and the guy who I texted when my ex-boyfriend made me mad number memorized.
You're like, I got it just for out of spite.
Now I feel guilty that I don't have my actual love of my life's number memorized, but I had those two. I don't remember those two now. Not that anyone cares.
Good.
But
you don't
what
need
I'm
them.
saying is, it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And I think he did, but we'll find out why that didn't fucking matter. So okay, when he returned to the house, the car then drives away. Sorry. The Neals telephoned the Martinsville Police Department for Carol, and they dispatched a patrolman who stuck around for 10 minutes, long enough to get a statement, basically, and then was like, yeah, what are you going to do? We can't do anything about that. They didn't do anything to you. So basically, didn't offer to drive her back to where she needed to be.
Right.
Didn't offer to, like, help in any way, write it down.
Right.
Like, it was just like, sorry, there's nothing what do you want me to do about it? And then just fucking left.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily, I'm sorry, Norma, I want to say Nancy, but I knew that wasn't her name. So luckily then Norma is like, I'm going to drive you around. We will try to find somebody that you came with so that you can at least have somebody to walk around with.
Right.
So they're driving around the neighborhood for several minutes trying to search for her coworkers. They can't find anybody. So she takes her back to the house and they wait inside. Back at the home, they offer for her to stay until 10 o'clock and then say, we'll drive you back. And this is around, I think, 8:30. But Carol turns down their offer to remain with them until it's time to rejoin her colleagues, saying, quote, she had been a bother long enough.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. When Paul Davis, the father, hears that, he said, quote, that sounds like her. I always felt like she was a very sweet, sort of naive girl. She had a smile for everybody. She never was in no kind of trouble, never gave me no trouble. Carol didn't like imposing on anybody.
That's so sad.
Mm-hmm. So the Neals tried to get her to stay, but she was like, it's okay. I'm good. I can go. No worries. Right. So this is at 8 o'clock. She thanks the Neals and she leaves. Not quite an hour later, 10 blocks away, near the corner of Morgan and Lincoln Street, which was just a block shy of her destination. Yeah.
Oh.
Eyewitnesses say they heard the scuffle. They look outside. They see her fall.
Okay.
So nobody else they don't see what happens, but they did see her fall. To them, it looked like she just fainted. She passed out. So I believe it was a teenage boy who lived across the street. He runs out and he calls for help. and in a nearby restaurant calls police. Police arrive and she's alive, but they call an ambulance and they deliver her to Morgan County Hospital where she is pronounced dead. Only then at the hospital was her brown wool jacket removed, and she has barely, but there's a blood-stained white turtleneck. And when they do an autopsy on her, they see that she has a single puncture wound on the left side of her chest, which has punctured her heart. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Horrible. The Martinsville. I'm so sorry. I'm like horribly messing my words up. The Martinsville Police Department, at that point, then, when she collapsed, nobody knows that it's a crime, really, but also at the same time, maybe you treat it as such. So, one, it's raining at this point. It's like downpouring.
Got it.
And two, they don't set up any kind of parameters to like, so it's horribly like
mishandled.
Yeah. There's people walking all along the crime scene.
Right.
Her glasses and her notebook were both discarded during the scuffle, and both have been picked up and like handled by people. There were about 50 people hanging around and like walking in between the crime scene, and the notebook was found lying near the entrance of an auto repair shop more than a half a block away from where she fell, meaning she was probably chased at some point,
right,
because she dropped her stuff and then ended up where she ended up. And basically the cops were like, well, we don't know what happened. We don't think that race has anything to do with it based on nothing.
Right.
We don't think that's an issue. They said, again, based on nothing, she probably had an advance by someone and she turned them down and they got angry. And so that's what happened, which is kind of also adding victim blaming into the fucking like, well, if she hadn't have been saying no, then it wouldn't have happened.
So you basically were balancing racism or misogyny or a happy little combo.
Mix of the two.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Not to mention...
Like, that's even better. Like, I don't think it's race. I think it's because she's a woman.
Yeah. Neither's good.
Both are horrible.
Yeah. So then Dawn tells the cops, hey, I saw this car, and this is a license plate for it, and they apparently ran it, but got nothing. So either potentially he didn't say the numbers wrong, or they didn't want to run it, or they ran it and didn't like what came up. So they never found a murder weapon, but they did find the dark colored car that was trailing and yelled at, and they found the driver and his friends, who were teenagers, I believe, and the teenager admitted having followed Carol but denied yelling at her. He said, we were following her to see if she was okay, and we just asked if she was all right because we didn't think she was okay. Which is like, and the cops were like, sounds fucking good, bye. Like, you're not going to ask any more questions. You're not going to like...
This is the whole, like, their word against...
That's exactly it. And it's infuriating because it's like, do you think she would have ran into a house scared out of her minds if some people were like, hey, are you okay?
No, of course not. But they're also already making her some kind of a villain or
she deserved it
in
a way.
Yeah, they're like, oh, she just misheard him. Oh, she just turned down in advance. It's like, why is this all her?
Yeah, and in your word versus hers, because she's not here to tell you. So this is back from that article by Mark Singer, and it's from an Indianapolis newspaper reporter. Quote, the town became a clam. I got the impression real quickly that there was something funny. I began knocking on doors to see if anyone had seen this gal, and I got nothing from the townspeople. After a while, we learned that nothing was going to happen, and even if somebody knew something, they were afraid to talk. They really didn't want outsiders coming around. It was cooled and cooled until it was futile, so we ended up just making routine calls, and when you called, you got the standard, the investigation is continuing. You knew if anything was going to happen, it would have to be an anonymous tip. After a while, the thing just petered out. So basically, people were like, I'm not going to talk, even though there were witnesses who said they saw like little things, but apparently not enough to...
But the people who were in charge of following through on any of it had no desire to figure it out.
Obviously not. So the case goes cold for over 30 years.
Damn.
Yeah. Then in June of 2000, Carol's mother, Elizabeth, receives an anonymous phone call from someone revealing the name of the killer.
Could you imagine living with that information for 30 years?
Well, they did it. Technically, you'll see.
Okay, sorry.
Technically, they did and they didn't because the anonymous tip says that they know this because there was an eyewitness. And the eyewitness was a 7-year-old. Yeah. So Elizabeth, who's the mom, tells Paul that this happened. And so he takes out $10,000 from his retirement savings to hire a private investigator to look into this.
Oh,
this man is fucking amazing. Then after Paul's effort, the Indiana State Police get wind of it, and then they're like, we're gonna fucking do something on this now. So they assign 2 cold case investigators to look back into the murder. In November 2001, the investigators receive an anonymous letter, then again naming the killer, Kenneth Clay Richmond. So this is the one that says that the 7-year-old who was the eyewitness was Richmond's 7-year-old daughter. Yeah. Okay. So this is where, it's all fucking sad, but this is like fucking unthinkable.
The fact that you did that in general, horrifying, but you did it in front of your child?
Yeah. So Richmond's estranged daughter of 24 years, so they hadn't spoken in 24 years. Her name is Shirley McQueen. She confirmed that as a 7-year-old, she saw her father kill this woman. Not only this, she describes her father as a horribly violent racist man who said that if he ever caught her or her sister even dating a black man, that he would kill them. Fucking terrible human being. So she says that as a 7-year-old, she's in the backseat of the car. Her dad and an unknown passenger are driving around drinking while their 7-year-old is in the car. And they see Carol out walking around. She describes seeing the 2 men jump out of the car when they see Carol, chase her down the street, grab her, and then her dad runs back to the car, grabs a screwdriver, runs back, stabs her, and then they get back in the car. And they're laughing. I'm sorry, this part has me like, my heart is racing because I'm disgusted.
I'm like speechless at that. That like, you chased her.
Yeah.
Why did you need to run back?
Right.
Why did you need to like
any of that shit? When they drove away, McQueen, Shirley, she says she looks back and she will never forget seeing her fall next to the bush.
Oh.
She states that as they drove back home, her dad gave her $7, one for each year that she was born, because she was 7, and told her not to tell her mom what she saw.
You're worried about mom finding out?
Well, I think anybody. He just told her keep quiet about it, basically. Jesus. So the way this was found, apparently, was Shirley had told her sister-in-law, Connie McQueen, what happened. And Connie ended up, she's the one that gives the anonymous tip.
Got it.
Not only that, but when Shirley corroborates the details of Carol's murder, detectives believe her because she gives, number one, they didn't tell that it was a screwdriver that killed her. And also she says she saw Jenkins wearing a yellow scarf, and the yellow scarf was found near the scene, and that wasn't released to the public. So they believe that Kenneth is the killer.
Was he still alive when?
Oh, but you're going to get more pissed. For more than 33 years, the murder of Jenkins remains unsolved until May 8th, 2002, when police arrest Kenneth C. Richmond in an Indianapolis nursing home. Upon his arrest, Richmond was found to be a 70-year-old career criminal who has had charges, by the way, of attempted murder and a murder charge, both that he got off on, by the way. With a history of bizarre behavior and affiliation with groups such as the KKK. At the time of the killing, Richmond lived on a nearby Hendricks County farm, and he was passing through Martinsville on the way back to his farm when they saw Carol. When he was about to be tried, so he's like on or whatever, about to be tried for this murder, he dies of fucking bladder cancer. And the whole time he says he's innocent until he dies. But I guess on his deathbed, he did admit to doing it. However, he never says who his accomplice is, which is fucking infuriating.
Right.
Also, this entire time, Don and Norman Neal never stop trying to find Carol's killer. They work with the police, with the family to try to find.
Yeah.
They're in the Injustice Files episode that I watched, and they are they end up moving from Martinsville because they're getting repeated death threats and harassment and shit like that for even speaking out and trying to find the fucking killer, which
What's
is
so just like the people who are paid by our taxes to defend and protect and find these people who commit these crimes and make sure that it doesn't happen again stopped looking or never started in the first place.
Yeah.
But the people who just were wanting to help her in the first place,
and unfortunately probably felt so much guilt for letting her go.
And her parents, they had to be the ones.
Yeah. To hire a private investigator to get shit done.
They had to literally pay to find out.
Just so they could get closure.
Yes, because they didn't even get justice.
No.
If there is such a thing.
Right. In 2014, the Neals proposed to have a monument. I think the Neals actually were working with the family, and they all proposed to have a monument erected in Martinsville in Carol's memory. However, the plans were scrapped after the county commissioner, Norman Voiles, said that he, quote, started getting flack about it. Because the people in Martinsville were like, the killer wasn't even from here. Okay, who gives a fuck?
Doesn't matter.
It's everything that happened after. It's her getting harassed the entire time she was there.
Yes.
It was. What do you mean?
It's
it
just
doesn't
a
matter.
symbol. Why would you not? Why would you not support a symbolic representation of the change that you want to make, of the part of you that you want to make sure doesn't carry on?
Because it's easier to get defensive and be angry
and
act like
continue to.
Yeah, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. It wasn't me. It wasn't me personally. So why should I have to?
Why wouldn't you want to?
Right. Well, that's what we keep hearing that. And it's like, what if you could right a wrong, though, wouldn't you? Even if you're not the one who committed the wrong, maybe why wouldn't you want to? If it helps anything.
Yes.
Anyone. However, a community park in Rushville, Indiana was rededicated in Jenkins' names as Carol Jenkins Davis Park on November 1st, 2017. And in 2017, a memory stone was placed in the garden of Martinsville City Hall. And I believe at that point, the mayor also publicly apologized for it. But it's almost like too little too late at that point. Like, okay, thank you, I guess.
Right.
Unfortunately, many in Martinsville and the county surrounding it still deny the town's past, and they can become incredibly defensive when even questioned about it. We see that happening in the Injustice Files. They send a couple people in to just talk to people in the diner, and the owner immediately comes over and is like, you guys have to fucking leave. She doesn't say fucking, but you guys have to leave. You can't be in here. You can't be talking to people about this. Shuts it down almost immediately.
Except that you've been in the dark
Yes.
and let someone turn the light on.
Please.
I don't understand.
Why do you want to keep fumbling around in the dark if the light switch is right there?
It's somewhat, you don't even have to touch it.
I know it's harder. I know it creates more work then when the light is on. You see everything that now you have to fix.
Yes.
Shit was broken when you were stumbling around in the dark, and I get that. It sucks now that you have to put it back together, but do you want to keep stepping on broken glass, or do you want to start fixing shit?
Right.
Okay, but the point of the story and this entire episode isn't just about Martinsville, Indiana specifically. In fact, as Dr. Lowen says in his book, quote, Martinsville is not unusual. For the most part, precisely what is so alarming about sundown towns, their astonishing prevalence across this country has made them not newsworthy, except on special occasions. Murders sell newspapers. Chronic social pathology does not. Yeah. Sorry, it's a heavy one.
Well, thank you for doing all of that research.
I'm happy. I'm happy to, and I hope that I did it at least a little bit of justice. Again, if you want to learn more, there are so many better resources. I had a week's time, and it was kind of as thrown together as I could.
And again, this is we want to start a conversation.
Yeah.
This is not the end all be all. Like,
no, I don't want this to be the last thing you hear about it. I would love you to continue this because it's so important. And again, it might be something that's like, why do I have to learn about history? But it's because it always repeats itself in one way or another. And if you can see what happened then and see how it slowly built over time into like this evil fucking thing, you can see the signs of when it's starting now.
You can see the through lines where it's maybe manifesting, maybe under a different name or behind a different mask.
To different people.
Yes. And we haven't done an episode like this in a while, not because we don't want to. It's just we hadn't, I don't know. I think everything was just a little bit crazy with the holidays and stuff.
And things are tough. These are tough. They're tough because you want to do them. I want to put as much as I can into it, but also emotionally they can be difficult, but they are important. And that's why I never want to stop doing them, and I want to make them more of a routine thing.
Yeah, and that's why we just, I hope that as many people stay to the end of our scandals episodes or our just like silly, goofy time ones, like our drunk histories. I hope just as many people who make it to the end of those make it to the end of this, because as important as it is for us to bring you community and friendship and laughter and be your little dose of serotonin, it's also very important for us to educate ourselves and use what we've learned to help educate you as well, and start a dialogue and advocate for people who are continuously overlooked and mistreated. Yeah. So
I didn't want it too much to sound like I was just lecturing, but there was just so much, and I thought so much of it was important, and I wanted to get as much of it out as I could. And as it's not our usual thing, but it is so important. And if there's one thing we can do with the platform that we have been like gifted because it feels like a blessing to us at times, it's like I want to do enough to give
good with it.
I want to do good.
So let us know if you have any other resources, or if you have any other topics in this vein that you want us to talk about, because like we said, this is going to be more of a routine thing. But thanks so much, guys, for hanging out. We appreciate you.
We do.
And that's that on Sundown Towns. And I wish that they weren't a thing to be a that. You know?
100%.
But we love you so much. And we'll see you next week.
All right.
We're out.
Goodbye.